All right, so this is Isaiah, Colton, and Chris Walker. We're doing a conversion masterclass here, where we're going live talking about specifically for sale by owners and expireds, and going through the best practices on not only how to generate the lead, but make sure the lead converts. And like we've been talking about, the theme we're kind of going along here is that you can have all the leads in the world, you can have the best website in the world, you can have the best database in the world, but if we don't have a really good sales and marketing plan to make sure the leads convert, then it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? And so a huge part of that plan is making sure we understand the psychology of the niche that we're working on. So, you have a lot of, people have a lot of different options out there. We talked about how the riches are in the niches. And one of the things, Chris, with our dialogue that we had last week, which I thought was great, was why for sale by owners, why expires. And one of the things that you had said was they're raising their hand, right? Yeah. They're raising their hand, and they're basically saying, I'm ready to sell, and if I can't do it on my own, they're going to look for an agent that they want to work with. If they're if they're for sale by owner. If they're expired, a lot of times they're obviously open to other options because they might not have had a good experience. So it's just about getting in front of them and showcasing why we're different than every other agent that's out there. Yeah. Would you say that's one of the biggest obstacles when you're dealing with an expired or a for sale by owner, is separating yourself from your competition? Or no?
Sure. Yeah. You've got, especially for sale by owners, you've got competition.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it a little bit more difficult as well than the expireds. Because if you go, if you grab the expireds that have been, off the market for a year, you have less competition. And if you're calling an expired that expired yesterday, 60 other people are calling. So
right.
I find it beneficial to, call the expireds at least 30 days.
Right.
Give them time to breathe. And that way they're not being bombarded by 40 agents in one day, because if you're the 40th call they've had, they're probably over it. They're not going to talk to you. So I hardly ever, call something that just came off the market expired. Give it some time, and then that raises your chances with less competition as well.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And so then we kind of went into the conversation about what you do when you get at the front door. It's where we left off, and talk about building rapport, how it's the most important thing, and knowing basically where the client's mindset is at too. You might have a two-step approach. It might be something depending on your culture, depending on your background, depending on your selling style, where your whole sales presentation is designed to get the listing on the spot, and the differences between the two of them and how to do them. And what I want to cover today is mainly the most common objections that we get when we're working with expireds and for sale by owners, and just give our audience an idea on how to handle them. So when they're dealing with pretty much any seller, there's really a handful of objections that we get, right? Yeah. And once we know how to deal with those objections and we then can build our marketing and sales plan, our presentation around handling those objections, even some of them in the presentation. But then when it comes out, we have really good, solid responses. We're very confident in our answers. So we're not losing deals because we're not responding to the client the right way. Yeah. And one of the areas that I see more deals lost than almost any other area in a sales cycle is actually the objection cycle. And so the way I teach it is I break it down into a cycle where empathy always has to come first. And people say, Isaiah, how come a lot of your clients, or even yourself, you're able to get through multiple cycles and they don't feel pressured? Well, the first step is always empathy, and making sure you're showing massive empathy, trying to put yourself in their shoes. I want to clarify something though, Chris, for our audience. There's a difference between empathy and actually agreeing with them. Right. Yeah. So right. One of I think the mistakes that happens in an objection cycle will almost come across as if they're, we got to be careful not to justify their objection or make their objection seem like it's legitimate or real, but still show that they're being heard. Yeah. One of my favorite things to talk about with human psychology in general.
For everybody that's married, they can understand that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Right. And it's so funny because it's funny you bring that up because I was talking to somebody else. I'm like, you know what? I'm so good at showing empathy when it comes to my objection cycle, but the second when it comes to my wife, right, throwing an objection at me,
my wife calls me
there's
out.
there's no empathy there.
Client,
like, and I wonder why she's getting pissed at me. Right? So and I was actually, I'm actually part of this men's conference, and that's something that we talked about. The whole theme is what best practices, like what principles do we apply in our business lives that we just don't do, and how much better off would it be at home if we just applied some of the same thinking principles, right? So it's like, and that's so, and it's so, yeah, right, exactly. But empathy is so important, right? And then from there, I think one clarification that I want to make for our audience, and this is just something to think about. The way that I like to teach how to handle objections is that usually the first one is never the real one. And because of that, we got to be careful how we respond. What I see that happens is they get too drawn into the objection. They give this long response or this huge justification, and then they end up losing momentum, and then the client takes control of the conversation, and there's no chance in getting the deal, and it almost always turns into a follow-up.
Yeah.
Where if it's a simple, what I call a simple cycle, where it's a simple short response, and then you go back into the enrollment process. So it's almost like you respond and then sidestep and then go back into wherever you left off in the conversation, back into trying to get them focused on the agreement. And I think that if we keep that in mind when we're going through our objection cycle and some of the context of when we hear some of this language, and I'd like to do something fun here and have you throw me an objection, and maybe we can just bounce some ideas off of each other what to say, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of keep this cycle, this simple 3-step cycle in mind. And then if the same objection keeps coming up, then we go deeper and actually have a deeper explanation where we try to isolate, we try to understand the psychology. We go through a longer cycle, which is more of like a 5-step cycle where the client gives the objection. Maybe it's the same one that comes up. Then you can go into like an isolation and say, hey, look, I get it. I'm hearing you loud and clear. Let me ask you, outside of really dealing with X, Y, Z or working out this issue, is there anything else keeping apart? And I just hope at this point we've had a good conversation. We can just be open and honest with each other. Yeah. Is there anything else that's stopping us if we can figure this one thing out, right? If we can figure this out. And then you can go through in the process of really trying to deal with it, handle it, provide maybe evidence or statistics or testimonials or whatever it may be around that specific concern to then go in and convert and close back into the agreement. So I just find, Chris, I wanted to bring this part up because I think the number one mistake is we try to dig too far deep into the objection cycle when most likely it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be a quick response and then we can get back into our agreement. So you'll notice kind of like when I am working with a client, no matter what the sale is, I try to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts you want to add to just the psychology of handling an objection before we kind of dive into specific objections?
You pretty much covered it, but the objections that I get on an expired and for sub owners,
yep,
where there's some are common, they are completely different.
Yeah.
Because the one, that I hear multiple times, just not that one time and then moving on an expired listing is, my last agent, was awful. They didn't sell the house. So no matter what they did, they could have been a good agent, but they didn't sell the house. Mm-hmm. So to that person, they're awful. And then, so you've got to dig and, hey, what are you going to do to, again, separate yourself? What are you going to do different than this last agent? And, give them peace of mind, that you're not just going to stick a sign in the yard and do the wish and prayer, Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Let's start off with this objection and let's break it down from, let's talk about the psychology of the objection, and then we can come up with some language. So basically, I think what you're saying, Chris, is they say, look, I get what you're saying, but that's what my other agent said too, right? Or something along those lines. Or how are you different than the other agent I'm working with and the other agents that I've interviewed?
Yep.
And that can be a tough, especially for somebody that has never been on an appointment before. They've never really had to prove themselves or have this kind of talk track or really understand the psychology. It can be a tough one to overcome.
Yeah.
It can be a tough one to overcome. So I'd like to start off by finding out what happened or what went wrong in their mind with the previous agent, what they didn't like. Obviously, they didn't sell the house, but outside of that, why do you think the house didn't sell? What do you think the agent could have done better?
Yeah. Well, that's
So,
what I think. Reiterating what I said in the past, there's only three things you can change.
yep.
So that's what I
Mhm.
tell them is, going in there. If it was priced right, then okay, that's not it. Was the
Mhm.
condition? Is it, are there cats all over the place? I mean, what's the condition? And most of the
Yeah.
time, it's marketed. Going, okay, well, what can you do to market it differently than the previous agent? So you've got to throw that in there. Uh, but I think what the most, especially down here, is I don't want to I hear is I don't want to get myself into a long-term contract
Mm.
with and the same thing happen,
Mm.
and that's usually the biggest objective. So once you find one of those three things, price, condition, and how it was
Mhm.
marketed, you find that out, then I always say, you know what, I tell people I work day to day,
Mm.
and if for whatever reason you don't like what I'm doing, we'll cancel the agreement.
Mm.
I don't have any problem doing that. I tell people, I said, I don't want to work with people that don't want to work with me.
Mm.
I said, in the years that I've been doing this, it's never happened, but feel free to do it. And all of my listing agreements, I put at the very bottom, I said, the seller, has the right to cancel this at any time. I protect myself, which you need to do. If you get with those, the person that's trying to scam you, protect yourself. Put those clauses in there. But that gives people a lot of peace of mind. Going, okay, well, if I get stuck with another sign digger, I can at least get him out of there. And
Yeah, definitely.
that's helped me a lot.
Good. Yeah, that's it's like an easy exit agreement, I think is what you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? So, uh that's good. So let's talk about that and let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do because let's just say to our audience, let's save that for a last resort, right?
Yeah.
So we got that as in our kind of unique value propositions. I want to back up just a little bit and say, okay, in my opinion, tell me if you agree, Chris, is the questioning and having effective questions at this point is so important to know what's going on in their head and what they're thinking, what they're dealing with,
Mhm.
and having effective questions to ask around what happened with it so you can find out really what they're thinking. Because you could throw that out, and if they didn't specifically say that, well, now
Now they're going to think in it.
yeah, now they're going to be thinking it, right? So I like to ask questions something along the lines of, hey, let me ask you, did your real estate agent actually break down what the marketing plan actually was,
Mm.
right? Let me ask you, how did the real estate agent, how did the last agent that you're working with actually price the home? What process did they use and what did they walk you through in actually pricing the home?
No.
Right. And then condition. Hey, just out of curiosity, what methods did they use, okay, to price the home around the current condition that it's in?
No.
And those are three simple questions around all the things you're talking about. But sometimes when we tell somebody something, they're less likely to receive it than if we ask them a question and they come back and say, oh, wait, they didn't show me a marketing plan.
No.
And then you say, okay, well, that makes sense to me. Let me show you my marketing plan and why you don't have to worry about the home not selling is because this is what I do. And if you have really good, if you have some good marketing materials, you got a good listing presentation, you can show them some of the things you're doing. It can be extremely powerful, and then what I like to use is like the easy exit agreement as a way if the deal's getting close, but I'm still sensing some hesitancy. Now you have that in your back pocket, right? You can kind of bring that forward. So some things that I like to use from a documentation standpoint that are common knowledge to us, and I think this is another big mistake agents make that are common knowledge to us when they're going out on a listing appointment, is what's common to us is not common to the homeowner. So for example, our marketing plan, because we've seen it, been in it, done it so many times, we say, hey, we got a great marketing plan. But how much more powerful it is to say we actually have a 17-point marketing plan, and you have it typed out, laid out in front of them so they can see step by step. And what I actually train and what we do for our brokerage, we actually give them a marketing calendar. So we actually have a calendar, and it has mapped out exactly what dates the certain marketing activities are getting done. So they feel like they have a tangible and something that's a real life marketing plan that has a calendar that they can hold in their hands. And then let me ask you, did your previous agent give you this? Now, what are you doing? You're separating yourself from
everybody else.
Because, I mean, Chris, how many of them give them an actual marketing plan in their hand with a calendar?
No.
Right? They don't. And so that's something that's a simple tool, easy to develop, but extremely powerful, because a lot of times there's something called the outside perception versus the inside reality, is the way that I like to say it. So outside perception is all agents are created equal. I think that's what you're saying, right? Like, how do I know you're going to be different than the other agent? Like, inside reality, there's a lot of different things. So if we do a really good job from a sales and marketing standpoint of showcasing and demonstrating through marketing materials and simple props, if you will, or handouts, that just adds so much credibility, so much trust, and makes it a lot easier to close the deal. So that's one thing I like to use for that. Another thing I like to use is actually have an agreement where it has what you just said lined out. It's an easy exit agreement, and you have a form, and you say, you have the form, and you say, look, here's something that I'd like to do for you, if just to feel confident moving forward with me. It's called my easy exit agreement. And then all I would ask is that if you're going to execute this, okay, you give me 30-day notice and let me know and give me an opportunity to adjust to why you're not happy. So what happens is they feel comfortable that they can get out, but it still gives you, to your point earlier, still give you some protection to be able to adjust to whatever they weren't happy about. And what's so crazy about just dealing with consumers in general, it could be the littlest thing, right? They could have something in their mind that might not even be true or real, or maybe there's just a disconnect in the process or whatever. And that it's kind of gives a nice opportunity for an agent, especially if you're doing a lot of volume, and maybe providing customer service gets a little bit tougher. And sometimes things like maybe the follow-up is a little bit tougher. It gives you an opportunity to kind of save the deal, if you will. So I like to put that addendum in there, that kind of like that 30-day notice type thing to be able to adjust. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's actually that's a really good idea. Yeah, I like that.
Cool.
Probably steal it from me.
Cool. Claire, I also too want, I want to make sure that when we're talking about this too, we can, after the video is done, we can post a link to the Ultimate Listing Machine masterclass, so they can log into that. So Chris, if you go to ultimatelistingmachine.com, if you want to write that website down.
I got it. It's ingrained in my head.
Oh, you got it. Okay, got it. And you click on the login. There's a section in there underneath the marketing section that actually has all the forms pre-written for you.
Oh, cool.
So if you didn't want to download them or recreate them, you could actually go in there and get those forms. And feel free to reach out to me if you're if you can't find them for whatever reason. So that's some good ammunition. So let's kind of circle. Let's talk about another angle that can be taken here too. So we have the 22-point marketing plan. We have the easy exit agreement. Those are kind of two awesome tools. You got the marketing calendar that you can show them to kind of separate yourself from your competition, how you're going to get more action. And that really does a good job of a lot of times tipping them over the edge of being able to close that deal. What are some other objections that you hear a lot when you're out?
Well, the one I see, especially, that's probably the number one from an expired, and then the number one you hear from a for sale by owner is commission. That's what you hear from them. Because the expireds, they're already willing to pay.
Yep.
So that's really not a big ordeal. It doesn't come up because they were already locked into to the rate, whatever they were charging. But, for sale by owners, it's all about, it's all about that money.
Yeah. So this is something that I think is a huge this is a hot topic because everyone's got a different philosophy when it comes to this. There's one school of thought that's like, I will never, ever, ever discount my commissions no matter what. They can go fly a kite.
Yeah.
And then there's another school of thought that says, well, I'll just discount my commissions anytime I need to get a deal.
Yeah.
I don't agree with either one of them. That's my personal opinion. I like to come in the middle to say, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure I don't discount my commissions. I'm going to have every objection. I'm going to have every marketing tool. I'm going to try to present all the evidence that I can possibly present to them, how I can net them what they need and still get paid my commission. But then, and only then, I'm going to come back to them with a really cool offer, which is what I call a smart seller program. Okay. And it's specifically built for sale by owners. And it provides what I call a flexible advantage. And what it does is, number one, it says, look, as a for sale by owner, if I have your home listed, right, and you can find your own buyer, you don't owe me a thing. And everyone immediately is like, wait a second, that seems like a lot of work. When your sign's in the yard and you're marketing it, the odds of them finding their own buyer if they haven't found one yet?
Yeah, slim to none.
None. Literally, out of all the times I've ever taught this or done it, less than 1% of the time do they ever find their own buyer.
Yeah.
And then even then you can build in, let me help you with, if you want me to help you with the transaction paperwork, I'll charge $500.
Yeah.
Right. You can kind of build that in. And then as a second part of the home seller program is, look, if it means me earning your business, if you also let me help you buy a home, okay, what I'll do is I'll do 1.5% to get you where you need to get to net what you need to net, contingent on the fact that you're open to, and you're willing to have me help you buy your home too.
But I'm not the only one. That's about the only time that I will reduce is
right
when they're going to buy something else, because any smart business person is not going to leave that money on the table.
No, it's not. I mean, you're
doing it, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're gonna.
There's smart ways to do it, though. Like I see, in fairness, like the perception is, and this is what I don't like seeing either, is people get in the habit, and that's how they close deals, right? So like they don't, or something that I just did a training earlier today. I did a workshop earlier today with a group of salespeople, and we were talking about this very topic. Is we're talking about when to negotiate and when not to. Number one, how much is that the ideal profile or client that you really think you can help, right? Is it somebody that you really see yourself working with, and is it worth it? Yeah. And number two, I personally will never negotiate unless I know that it's a fair and equitable arrangement where something is going to be given in return. So as an example, the buy side, like I know I'm going to have an opportunity to help them buy a home. Another example would be is maybe I have some testimonials where I have pre-written in the contract to say, hey, look, or not pre-written, but just at least the understanding, say, hey, look, if I do this for you and I can get you what you need to get, would you be at least willing to give me a really awesome testimonial and some referrals over the next year as you bump into people? So it's something I'm going to ask them later on anyway for referrals, but now I'm planting the seed, and it doesn't make it feel like I'm just giving away something because I want to get a deal.
Yeah.
And it helps me make sure I recover that by getting referrals and getting more business from that transaction, because one of the most common, I think one of the biggest struggles in our industry right now is we get so caught up in the newest lead, and the cost per lead is going up, the cost per transaction is going up, but we don't take advantage a lot of the times of our most valuable asset, and that's our current and past clients. And so what I always try to say is, how do you maximize? If I'm going to spend $190 to get to an appointment, let's say I hire an ISA, or maybe I do Google ads or Facebook ads or whatever I'm doing to get that lead to come in, right? I know I have that fixed cost. And I have to do whatever I got to do, not just to get that transaction, but also to maximize that. And what I love, what you talked about yesterday is or last week, is you had a transaction that went from $100,000 listing to kind of like not really a listing. You didn't know if you wanted to take it, but you turned that into $1 million in business.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what if we had pre-built into our smart seller program that when these conversations come up, it's pre-built in to have a contingency of some kind that you want a testimonial and referrals.
Yeah.
How powerful is that then to be able to get 2, 3, 4 transactions off of that?
For sure. Yeah.
I actually got a story real quick, Chris, if you don't mind. An agent, this is probably 2 years ago, I was working with now. And he followed this process. He actually did 1.5%. He got the buy side, but he also requested that after the home sold, that there's a testimony on video and that there's some referrals. The neighbor did business with him from that. He got a video. He can't even count how much business he's got off that video.
No.
Because that video is invaluable. It sticks with him forever. And then his father also did a transaction. So he got 3 transactions plus the power of all the business that he gets off the video every time he showcases his testimonials. Is that not worth working out a deal with a for sale by owner that's crazy? Because they're worried about a point.
Saving a couple $1,000.
Saving a couple $1,000, right? I think it is. If it's done the right way. So, so that's something I call the smart seller program. And if anything, what it does, it also builds value on yourself. See, I think this is so important too, is when we're willing to drop too quickly before we try to share with them the difference with our marketing plan, the difference in what we're doing, the difference with the client experience, showing them the net sheet. Chris, you'd be surprised how many agents I talk to, they don't even show them a net sheet. How, like, they don't break down the numbers of what they're actually going to be able to net them before they'll drop their commission. So for example, let's just say you're the for sale by owner and you're like, I don't want to pay the commission. And you said, and I said something to you, hey, Chris, I respect that totally. Let me ask you this question though. If we walk through a net sheet and I could get you the bottom dollar that you wanted to get, could we at least go through that exercise and see what that looked like? How many of them would say no to that?
No. Most of them, all of them would listen,
Yeah, they're going to listen. And then you break it down and you show them what's happening. You show them what's happening, what the numbers look like. And you'd be surprised how many of them, when they see that number, will actually agree to that number.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. There's the circumstances where they're way overpriced. There's no way to get them to the number. And you might have to do something, but you at least try that approach first. And then you go to the smart seller program, because at least you built value on yourself. You built value in your marketing plan. You're further along in the closing cycle. And in a funny way, Chris, you actually develop more rapport and more of a relationship with them by going through this exercise. And then you say, okay, fine, let's do this. Here's my smart seller program. And you bring out that paper. That one's also in the file as well in that class. If you wanted to check out that as well. So you have any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next objection?
You've got the right ideas. I tell people, I think I told you, a couple of weeks ago when people asked me to, well, so-and-so said they do it for 4%, and I always say, well, good for so-and-so, what do you do for a living? And I do ask them that, and they say, well, I'm an attorney. So, well, what can you, barter with them, and make them kind of visualize and realize, okay, well, why would I barter with, these professions? Just like anything else, and then the other one I throw out is, I said, I would love to do it, but I blame it on my broker. I say my broker won't let me do it.
Yeah.
I said, I'd love to help you out. I understand where you're coming from, but flat out, my broker will not let me do it.
That's really good.
This cost. And that's one of the things my broker, he said, blame it on me.
Yeah.
The average consumer does not know that, you can set, whatever you want at most brokerages, but, he's like, say, blame it on something else, and sometimes I pulled out and said, I'd like to, but my wife won't let me, blame it on whoever you want, but just be firm. And I mean, it's a punch in the gut, especially down here. We've got flat fee guys.
Oh yeah, they're all over the place now.
And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you really want to, quantity over quality is what I always say.
Yeah.
I mean, burn and turn kind of business, even though they think they're full service. I mean, if you do that, and that model is, kind of like it's the wholesale approach,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, with your biggest asset, I mean, do you really want that approach?
Right.
I'd rather pay the extra, just a little bit of money, and know that it's going to be done right.
That's so true.
It's tough though. I mean, and I think the world that we're getting into, and with the Zillows and iBuyers and stuff,
it's getting harder.
We've got to be better than ever.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's where I think this marketing plan is so important. Is if you showed them the marketing plan, and you showed them the calendar, and then you say, okay, well, so and so was willing to do it for 4%. I think you had mentioned to me, or let me ask you, did they show you this marketing plan?
No.
Right? Oh, they didn't. Well, let me ask you, for the money that they're willing to save to you, would you ever think about maybe they're able to save that money because they're not going to do as much marketing? Because great, anyone can put your home on the MLS, but at the end of the day, my goal is to be able to showcase the home locally, regionally, and even out-of-state buyers, do all sorts of different, get maximum exposure to the property. And if anything, I don't want to take away from your experience of getting this sold for the most money in the least amount of time. And my concern with you, John, is if you go to that person for 4%, right, then that's what they could be doing.
Yeah, they're cutting something out.
Yeah. Right. So this is really good. Why don't we end it there, Chris? Last question for you. What's your least favorite objection that we can throw out there right now that we don't have to answer, that we can kind of pick up next week when we do our session?
Seriously, my least favorite, and I tell you, as long as I've been doing this, and I get awkward every single time, is the commission one.
Right.
I mean, really, honestly,
Yeah.
I wish I could be better, and say, okay, well, it's this one. But I mean, even to this day, I get squirrely when talking about it, and I'll be fine to admit it.
A lot of people.
And no matter how long you've been doing this,
yes.
I mean, that's the one you're gonna get.
Yep.
I mean, more than half the time.
So what we'll do is between now and next week, we'll see what documentation we can provide. We'll really hit home on that one again as we kind of pick up and before we move on to go to the next ones, because
even to help me out, I mean, because you'll get the market's so good right now. It says like, well, my neighbor sold theirs, in one day for sale by, kind of. What do you say to that?
Right.
I mean,
right. Yeah.
Say, hey, if I can make you more money, raise the price, and they're like, well, you can get that, so can I, and I can save $12,000.
Right.
And then you're just like, you know what? Touche. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, so if you want to,
I like that. I like that. So, well, Chris, actually, if you wouldn't mind, just a couple different scenarios, like practical scenarios that like that one, if you could just write me an email, like, look, the for sale by owner, their neighbor was a for sale by owner, sold the house in X amount of days.
Yeah.
And now this is what they're saying to me, or any other, because it's one thing to handle and say, hey, look, it's the commission, but there's a lot of different circumstances around why they're saying they don't want to pay the commission, I think is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Cause everybody thinks that, the market's good, especially right now in the past years, which it has been, and they think it'll sell fast. And that's one of those, for sale by owners, you really want to go talk to them the first day it's on the market? Probably not anyway, because they're not going to be receptive to what you're saying. But, give them a couple weeks, and maybe they're more inclined to talk to you then.
Yep.
Always try to introduce yourself, go to the open house or something and say, hey, that first day. But, I mean, don't get pushy because it ain't going to work.
No, that's something that we got to talk about too, is making sure we're doing this without like you said, without being pushy. And that's why that empathy is so important, showing that empathy first before you actually go into the objection cycle. So with that, Chris, I really appreciate your time. I hope you have an awesome week. Until next time, everybody, Isaiah Colton, Ultimate Listing Machine. You can go to ultimatelistingmachine.com. It's either if you've already purchased the course logged in, or if you want access to it, it'll show you how to get access to that course from there. And I hope you guys have an awesome week.
All right. Thanks, Isaiah. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.
Be good.
Yep, you too.